I get a living out of it. In that sense, it's well worth doing. If we're talking about the latest Tai-Tai on the line to discuss her lost budgerigar, then I would say emphatically not. But when was the last time you heard a lost budgerigar discussed on Open Line?
Yeah, it's not a lost budgerigar, perhaps, you know, they change from one animal to the next. I'm talking really, though, about the amount of trivia which seems to come through. I mean, there is undoubtedly a certain amount of that.
Trivia is inevitably, it's going to be a standard part of our fare. There's nothing whatsoever that we could do about that. There's nothing I would want to do about that, because by definition, Open Line is open. It's open to whatever people want to talk about. They phone us up, we phone them back, they go on air, and they talk about what's on their mind. So, quite naturally, if it happens to be whether or not a piece of ice cream advertising is misleading, as we had the other day, or it's a lost bag in a taxi, that is uppermost in somebody's mind. Or if it happens to be a hole in the road, and some businessman has driven to work in his car and shattered his rear axle in that hole in the road, it's very much on his mind. He gets it off his chest, and with any luck, he might also get something done about it. Yes, trivia is important to us, but it's not the overriding consideration.
But look at it from another angle. I would say that we should consider those things as routine and recurrent inquiries rather than trivia, because most of what we consider trivia has got to do with the daily living of common people. I think this is especially true in the Chinese program. For example, we do have recurrent themes coming up. Transport, people complain about bus services, about living conditions, about the relationships with government departments. I mean, look at it one way, you could say that it's trivia, but it's got to do with people's everyday dealings with other people. And sometimes you find this, you know, as a host, sometimes, at least myself, I find it boring to listen to complaints on bus services a fourth or fifth time on the same day. But I mean, these are the sort of things that people are concerned about.
And cumulatively, it does give an indication of the public mood, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does.
In addition to which, of course, one can always ask the question of there are limited channels for complaints in Hong Kong. You can't very well go and lobby your MP or your local town councillor or whoever. You can go through Home Affairs Department, you can go through a few other people, you go through your Melco. But there aren't that many channels in Hong Kong.
What's your view, Jack?
Oh, I agree. And, you know, the lost budgie, we come back to that one. Yeah. If you're a family and, you know, one of your kids has lost the budgie or their kitten or their dog, it is the biggest thing in their life on that particular day. And, you know, no matter how hard they try, the letters to the editors' columns of the newspapers just can't do what talkback radio does in this type of thing.
And I think if we consider it from the other end, which is the listening end, I myself, for example, enjoy listening to phone-in shows, to shows on other channels. You know, you listen to a call. It talks about certain very sort of routine things, but naturally you're interested because it's this man's problem, and he's talking about it openly. So it's interesting in its own way.
Do Chinese people talk as openly as Gwailos do? I mean, do you have the same reaction that we do? I mean, it's rather natural for a Westerner to pick up the phone and phone in, at least for most people. My wife, for instance, is terrified out of her wits, but most people do. Now, is it quite the same for Chinese?
I don't really know, but I would think so. Although one of my frustrations, in fact, one of the mysteries has been to me, the lack of response from what I call middle-class people. I think people living in, for example, public housing estates, they, you know, many of them do phone in, but what I call middle-class people, it seems that most of them are standing aloof. They, you know,
it's a bit beneath them,
it seems to me that they're not phoning in for I think a variety of reasons, but it's been my frustration to try to get them.
I mean, maybe they listen to the English channel.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, if so, they don't call us. I'd like to be hearing from them.
No, but I must re-emphasise, with all humility, trivia, when I talk about trivia, I'm obviously not degrading people's feelings for their budgerigars or anything else. What I'm worrying about is that there seems to be a tendency among all this mass of polls to overlook the big issues. There are so many, and of course this is where probably all four of us here are very concerned people. We are mixed up with news and the big events. So for us, perhaps, it's very frustrating when people just ignore what I consider are vital issues, both inside and outside the colony. What do you think so, Jack?
Oh, Russell, yeah, I sat down one day and sort of broke this whole thing down, Talkback Radio, and to me there were four main issues involved in whether or not you've got a successful show. One, of course, is the audience, and I think in Hong Kong I'd give the audience for quality 10 out of 10. The next factor is the callers you actually get, and I'd give them 5 out of 10 in Hong Kong. The next one, especially if you're, when sort of program I was running, and I'm sure Steve feels the same way, the next factor is the quality of the cooperation you get from the government, big business, the establishment generally. And then, of course, the last one is the type of person who's doing the broadcasting. We won't go rating that last one, but on the cooperation one, you know, I'd give the sort of about 2 out of 10 for the sort of experience I had.
In fact, this is one of the prime reasons why you decided to pack it in eventually, isn't it?
Oh, it was, Steve. Total frustration. It was just an accumulation of frustration day after day. I came to believe, whether I was justified or not, I came to believe that I was being frozen out by the government. The fact that, okay, I could get people on there to talk about issues which were not going to really get the town jumping up and down. But on anything of any substance at all, I just found that government people weren't available to me. And, you know, I could quote examples of, we've got in this town this feeling that gets around that we're asking too much of our civil servants to be politicians as well as civil servants. Well, you know, I disagree. They've taken the job, they're getting the pay and everything that goes with it, and they do play politics. They get up and they make their Rotary Club speeches. You know, I'm one of these people who believe that in Hong Kong we've got this rule by Rotary almost, where they fly the kites at Rotary. And then next day, when you try and get them on the air to take it a bit further and let the public have a bit of a go, you've got no hope.
I mean, doesn't RTHK get special treatment, though, Steve? I mean, being a government service, aren't you helped out rather more?
No, I don't think that's fair to say, actually. I think it's because, certainly, I don't know what kind of backup Jack had while he was doing his programme, but we have excellent backup on RTHK.
When you say backup, you had to explain.
I'm talking about producers.
Yes,
I myself produced the programme, in fact, for Ralph Pixon, as you know, Russell,
yeah,
for several years. And we work very hard to get people on.
Could you perhaps tell people who have never seen the programme what that actually means? It means you're in the studio answering the calls, yes. Then what is this backup? Tell people.
We've got a team of 3 in the production side, and basically their job is to listen to the callers that are coming through, decide what are the most interesting subjects, if you've got a choice, that is, put them through on air, and then they're chasing up. Thereafter they're chasing. It's a strictly journalistic reporting exercise, and that carries on throughout the day. It's not merely during the programme, but afterwards you're hustling, trying to get people to come through, and that's not merely government, it's the private sector as well.
Absolutely,
and as you've said, they can be sometimes very tough to get on. But you've got to hustle, and you've got to try and get them through.
Yeah, I sort of felt that as far as my own programme was concerned, and okay, everyone probably felt in the government that, you know, don't talk to this fellow Spackman because he'll ask nasty questions. Okay, I think I'm entitled to ask any sort of question I want to ask, given the laws of slander and libel and courtesy and so on. And I don't really think I ever had any complaints from people I interviewed. It was the people who wouldn't be interviewed who used to make the noise. But I just felt that they weren't taking the programme seriously enough, and I felt that that was an insult to the audience out there, because they were taking it seriously. I was prepared to take it seriously, but as far as I was concerned, the government and the big business people weren't.
Don't you sense a change in the 2 years since you gave it up? They seem to be a bit more responsive, don't they?
Yeah, I think it's been a big improvement in the terms of who you can get on there nowadays, and possibly the bit of noise I made when I went out might have sort of caused a shake-up.
Probably all 3 of us here, you know, help in a way in changing the mood, in changing the you know, the thoughts, philosophies behind answering to inquiries and responding to questions.
Do you get Chinese speakers easily on the air?
In most cases, yes, but I must say, in certain quarters, we still find it difficult to get somebody speaking in Chinese to talk about, for example, matters related to policy. That still happens, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to start questioning the government line, then obviously you're going to run into a certain amount of resistance. Do Chinese officials, though, come forward gladly? I mean, if you get them on the line and say, well, I want you to answer this?
Well, yeah, I mean, depending on which department. I think in these days, in most cases, we do get answers rather quickly. But of course, I mean, I think even for example, in Steve's case, you might have somebody who's reluctant to come on air, which is natural. And,
I think it's important to make the point that we do question government policy, and even if we are questioning government policy, we nevertheless try and get the people through. And we're having a reasonable success rate in doing that. The other thing, if I can just take it back a couple of steps, for a second you were talking about trivia and the important issues at stake in this town. I agree with you totally, but if one were to discuss nothing but important issues every day of the week, it would become just a little bit heavy. You need to break it up.
God, well, let us break it up for just a moment. We'll be back after this break. Well, at least Steve isn't bothered by any commercial breaks on his program. Steve, you're talking then about the going back to the whole business of having serious issues. All right, I'll go along with you that we couldn't have serious issues all the time. But I must say that I am shocked often when there is something very important in the newspapers or ringing around this town, and all I hear about is the traffic on Castle Peak Road. I know if I lived in Castle Peak Road, which God forbid, I would be complaining. I have Pock Fulham Road, and I feel the same temptations. But there are bigger issues, and I sometimes regret that these are not taken up. Is it because a lot of people here don't care?
I don't think that's the case at all, Russell, and I think, without wanting to sound offensive, that by and large, if you monitor the kind of subjects that are raised on your program, Focus, given the exception of tonight, we have a very similar sort of subject matter on Open Line. Yeah. But as I said,
we steal all the subjects off you. I mean,
before the commercial break, which we don't have on Open Line, very often it's going to, if you have this too frequently, if you have it every day, nothing but heavy, very solid subjects, it's going to become just too much to digest. You're going to get mental indigestion as a result of it, and you cannot sustain it. It's quite apart from anything else. I mean, we'd be completely worn through by the whole thing. You need to have the lighter element. Yes. You're going to have